What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Scratch Agency Podcast, episode number 1. My name is Stephen Turnbull, founder of T5 Insurance Services. I'm here with my co-host, Shawn Fitzgerald, founder of LAF Advisors. Shawn, how are you doing today?
Dude, I'm doing well, Steve. I'm glad we finally got this kicked off. We recorded a few episodes today, and we kind of did them in reverse order. But I'm stoked that we finally got to recording, and I'm super excited to finally get this show started and on the road, man.
Yeah, listen, so we are grateful for you listening to episode number 1. We hope that you stay along with our journey, and that's exactly the point of this show, is to document our journey as Scratch Agency owners. As I said, my name is Stephen Turnbull, and I'm calling in from Utica, New York. That is not the Big Apple, Aaron Gordon. That is right dead in the center of the state in upstate. We are about 45 minutes east of Syracuse, so there are more cows than there are city buildings up here, and that's and that's the beauty of anytime I travel, say where we're from. Oh, Utica, New York. Oh, what part of the city? No, upstate, right into the center.
We're a good 6 hours from each other at least.
Yeah, at least. And I tell Shawn this all the time. I've actually never been officially to the city. I took
we got to change that.
A Yankee tour bus out of Syracuse down to the Yankees game. I went down, got off the bus, walked about 20 feet into the stadium, went to the game, got out of the stadium, walked back on the bus, and went home. So I don't count it as being into the city. So Shawn and I will maybe do some in-person podcast at some point, and I'll make my way down there. But Shawn, why don't you introduce people to where you're calling in from?
Yeah, so I'm from Long Island, New York. The insurance carriers consider it the downstate territory of New York. Like I said, I'm about 6 hours from Stephen. I'm about an hour out from New York City. Long Island's great. It's a bit of a coastal area. You know, we get a hurricane up the coast every once in a blue moon, so some of the carriers on the property side are a little restricted and whatnot, but it's a great town, man. Like I said before, I'm just really excited that we're getting this podcast up and running. I think for this first episode, we kind of just wanted to get into kind of how Stephen got into the industry, how I got into the industry, and what our goal of the show is. So, Stephen, you want to start us out with just kind of how you got into the industry, and then we'll just roll from there?
Yeah, and I would just touch on that I think the goal of the show is to help anybody looking at starting their producer journey or starting that scratch agency. So I come from a long bloodline of insurance agents. I am a 5th-generation agent. My last name is Turnbull, hence the T5 in my business name, so that's where that comes from. I've been in the industry 2 days after graduation from college. I went to St. John Fisher in Rochester, New York. I graduated on a Friday or Saturday, jumped in on Monday in the family agency. My family agency, my father runs a very successful agency here in town. Long-term history, 158 years old, and I was the 5th generation on track to take that business over. In May of 2022, almost 6 months ago to the date here where we're recording this, I took the jump and started T5 Insurance. Out of the pure sense of, I think we can all do better. I think we can all do better as insurance agency owners. I think we can all do better as insurance agents and provide our clients, that top-level experience. And it was just a different vibe from what my family agency was on track to do. And so I said at 27 years old, getting married in 3 months, now's the time to do it. I took the jump, and that was back in May. And that was actually a week before Shawn and I met for the first time at the Big I conference, and where this conversation started going about doing the podcast. And Shawn and I are now a part of an accountability group. And so that's kind of the history of my history and how Shawn and I met. But Shawn, what about your story? How did you get started in the business?
Yeah, and just to touch on that, I think it's just a cool story to share. Louis Gazatua, shout out to Louis down at Jag Insurance in Miami. Louis and I have been talking for a while, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey man, you got to get in touch with this guy, Steven." And my response was, "Dude, that's great. When I get back from this Big I conference, I'll definitely reach out to him." And then Steven reached out to me, "Hey, I'm at the Big I conference." And then, we just connected from there, and it's been awesome ever since. So yeah, I think that was just a funny story how other people in the industry connected to us. And that is part of the reason we wanted to start the show, right, is bring value to other agents in the business, maybe people who are starting scratch. You don't necessarily have to start scratch, but I've had a lot of agents within the industry since I started reaching out to other people in the industry a couple of years ago, and a lot of people have helped me. So I kind of this is like one way of returning the favor, right? And then let's be honest, there's selfish reasons too. Like, I think there are things that could benefit us from starting a podcast, like, potential carrier appointments and things of that nature. So I think just in general, it'll help put out content. It'll help build a presence in the space. And like I said, if we can just help one person in the process of doing that, I think it's, that's a home run, right? But anyway, I went off on a tangent. To give you a little bit about my story, I started in the industry back in 2010. Prior to that, I was in the United States Air Force, and I was in the Air Force for 6 years. But I was in the National Guard, so we can call that like part-time duty, so to speak. So I did my initial training, which was all full-time, and then once that was completed, I was part-time, so I was able to get into the insurance space. I knew someone who married into the family. Met him when I was about 20 years old. And I just went to this guy's house, kind of saw how he was living, got really curious, learned about the industry, got licensed, asked him for a job, and I worked there for about 10 years. It was a nationwide agency. I started out doing personal lines the first couple of years. Then I started doing some small commercial. Then I guess, middle market always has a different definition for everyone. But then I started getting into the larger commercial, let's say. And once I got a taste of those larger premiums, I got hooked into the commercial space. And I just found it very interesting how every business is just so different. And it's a lot different than writing personal lines. I'm not knocking personal lines. I write a lot of personal lines now. But I think it's, a good thing not to have all your eggs in one basket. So I would say now we've grown to we're probably, I could say 60 commercial, 40 personal. And I opened my agency. I decided to go out on my own in 2020, a couple of weeks before the pandemic started. But,
Perfect.
I was, right. At the time, I was 30 years old when I decided to go out on my own. And similar to Steven, I just got to a point where I started thinking more long picture, right? Thinking about having a kid and thinking about, man, what's it going to look like when I retire and all those things. I guess around that 30-year-old age is when those things start creeping into your head. But I just started thinking, what kind of legacy do I want to leave for my family? And I started reverse engineering that, right? Like, okay, what are really my long-term goals? And then when I started reverse engineering everything, I was like, man, the only way I feel like I'm really going to accomplish that is by owning my own agency or having a large portion of equity in the agency I'm in now, or some sort of equity in my book, right? So since I couldn't work that out, I decided to go out on my own. I started completely scratch like you, Steve. I didn't have any clients. I didn't have any carrier appointments. I had a niche in hospitality and a pandemic, so I kind of just had to pivot right when I opened. But man, I got to say, I think what we all learned from this recession, and I do feel bad saying it because a lot of people were hurt during during the pandemic. But we kind of learned that the insurance industry is quote unquote recession proof, right? So, I was blessed that everything worked out and we've been able to stay busy. And I'm sure you can attest to, I know you weren't open in 2020, but you could see businesses still doing very well.
Yeah.
Everyone always needs insurance, right? So that's kind of how I ended up where I am. And I think, like I said, building off on the legacy, that was a big thing for me, was leaving a legacy. And then it's so funny because sometimes you have to, if you just look up the definition of legacy, what does a legacy mean? It's very interesting. This is what I pulled up. A family legacy is hope for the future, right? It arises from using your wealth for the benefit of others, providing for your family over many generations, and also giving to charities and nonprofits whose work you value. And I thought that was so awesome, and I've written that down, and that's why I was just reading off it. I think that's, if you want to leave a legacy, that's my term of what a legacy actually means. So besides that, I mean, honestly, having my own freedom, right? Who doesn't want their own freedom? Not everybody, I guess, but that attracted me too. And then the challenge as well. I was up for, it's so funny because I heard Scott and Bradley talk about this recently, and how as a producer, you could be doing the same thing every day for 10 years. And I was like, damn, yeah, that was me. Doing the same thing every day and not really seeing the big picture, right? And I think when I started looking at my own agency and thinking about it, I was really writing out, hey, this is such a challenge, right? This is what can happen. Then you got to grow here and grow here and grow here and grow here. And it was just writing out the plan. and seeing that, I was like, this is awesome, and this is for me. And that's kind of how I got pulled into opening my own agency.
Yeah, wow, you hit on a lot there. I mean, the legacy for me, the legacy for me was everything. So like I said, I left my family business where I was on track to take over being the 5th generation. My last name was on the sign. I was known as, the next in line. And like you just said, just different feelings of different ways to do things. And it was time to make the legacy of Stephen Turnbull, not the legacy that was the next in line. And so that's kind of, one thing with T5 that I tied it to my legacy of my family business with it being a 5th generation agency owner at this point. That I've tied into. One thing that I want to add on to your point, Shawn, about the point of doing this show. Anybody that's listening to this that has recently started a business or started a scratch agency, to be specific, knows it's not easy. The biggest struggle that I had is being alone, right, and feeling like you're in this alone. Now, I have a very supportive wife, I have very supportive friends. Don't get me wrong. But I'm very much a team player. I'm very much a team person where I want to reach across the desk and give Sally a high five on that big account we just won. So for me, if I can help one person through this podcast, that you're not alone in this. I think Shawn, I've told you flat out that you've served that for me as being, hey, I've run into this situation. What do you think? Or I got this big win today. Virtual high five, whatever that is. I think that's the biggest part of this podcast for me is that, you're not alone. Dig down deep in yourself. It's worth it. We all know it's worth it. We've seen the people that are 10, 20, 30 years in our industry, and just kind of providing that. And the biggest thing is just hosting the platform to have all the great people. I think like you said, we had 2 killer episodes that we already recorded today. We've got a great lineup of people that are going to provide great value that either started scratch or have systems that will help you, or processes or experiences where they've failed. And so, just looking at it as a big picture, that's the most exciting thing for me.
Yeah, and I think everyone, as I connect with more people in this industry, everybody really is, for the most part, like very cool to be around, nice to be around. They want to help, right? And I think that's awesome. And that might have been one of the things originally where, the first few, say like 9 years of me being in insurance, like I didn't really connect with other people within the industry because I don't want to say I didn't know that, but I didn't think, those would be people I'd want to hang out with. I'm just being honest, right? But as I connected with everyone, I'm like, wow, this is like a really cool group of people. Most people just want to help, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about our industry. And, speaking of like super niche, like us opening a scratch agency, right? I think what's really cool too is we can share, kind of our stories in the sense of like, I'm a couple of years in, you're about 6 months in. So I can kind of share with you some of my mistakes and you can learn from them. We have other people in our accountability group that have opened scratch agencies and they kind of talk about the same thing, right? Like some of the success they had with cold calling or sales strategies or, carrier appointments and things of that nature. And those are all things we're going to share on this podcast. Is our experiences. It could be sales. It could be wedges we drive to, gain new business. It could be, servicing, technology, anything about operating and running an agency. So I think, it applies to scratch agents, but it could also apply to other people within the industry too,
One way I was explaining to somebody who wasn't in the industry recently when I was talking about our accountability group and just the general IA channel as a whole is everybody's on the same escalator. We're just on different steps. Yeah. Even if you look at the both of us, you're what? How long are you? Over 2 years?
Yeah, it'll be 3 years in February. Yep.
So about 3 years. I'm 6 months. We're still on the same escalator. We're going through the same daily grind of trying to figure out things and one step in front of the other. But we're on the same escalator, just in different steps. And I think that's exciting to just share the journey, document it down on a platform, and hopefully help people along the way.
100%. And I feel like we work, one of the main reasons you and I connected is because I feel like also too, we hold each other accountable for certain things. Like I don't want to cold call. I'll be honest. I hate cold calling. But, the other day we got in the chat. I'm like, dude, I'm doing this many cold calls every day. And I'm just going to write it in the chat because I know if I do that, it's going to make me want to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and to your point, I mean, just to give a plug to the IAOA group, a month or so ago, I went to the national conference, in Nashville, and I know Shawn had some serious fear of missing out when he was not there, and he's going to be going to Chicago. But every single person I met had that name badge on that said first time attendee. And every single person I met ended the conversation with, let me know what I can do to help. Either
that's awesome.
I've been where you are, or I've heard what it's like to start an agency, or whatever, heard your story, whatever it may be. Every single, and I'm not exaggerating, every single conversation ended with, reach out, connect with me, let me know what I can do to help, let me know if this can help you or whatever. And so I not that I've had too much experience in other industries, because I said I jumped right into this after college, but you don't really hear that a ton of, like Jason Cass said at the conference, better together. Everybody's working together for the same common goal, and I think it's a special place to be.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I mean, think about it this way, like, how many of the people you speak with in the insurance space are you really running into their policies? Almost never.
Right.
And if you do come across one, you get in touch with the person. I mean, that's it.
Exactly. That's the point of the show, folks. Listen, we really want you to just follow along. We're going to be on the YouTube channel and all the podcast networks there, so please share the show with any of your peers and your accountability groups. Even if you're not a scratch agent, make sure to listen. We're going to have some exciting guests on. We got some good shows lined up already to provide different insight, and maybe you're just a producer out there that's been in a funk and looking how to take that next level up, and maybe something that one of our guests says will resonate with you to take that leap and dig down in yourself and realize that you can do it. So, Shawn, if you don't have anything else to say, that is episode number 1 of the Scratch Agency podcast. We appreciate you listening. Make sure to join us next week, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening or watching that episode of the Scratch Agency podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you next time. If you have any questions, you could reach out to myself or Steven on Instagram or LinkedIn, and we'll see you next week.